Welcome back. Joining us in studio right now, of course, we have Ramy El-Batrawi, the author of this wonderful book. And sitting to my right, it's very interesting because we're going to be speaking to a lot of people that are personal friends of Ramy, but we're also going to be speaking to people that have helped Ramy through plenty of trials and tribulations. And I literally mean the word trial in this situation because the guy I'm sitting next to right now, his name is George Newhouse, and George met Ramy way back in 2001, and they had a big battle that they won, and that was a battle against the government. So that's why George is joining us right now. George, thanks for being here. How are you doing?
It's a pleasure.
So, George, take me back to 2001. The first time you met Ramy, the first time you heard about his situation, what went through your mind, and what was your first impression?
Well, it's hard to say, but for 12 years I was a federal prosecutor, so I know how the government pursues individuals criminally and civilly. And I met Ramy in connection with a relentless pursuit of Ramy and some of his business colleagues by the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is the Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and Ramy and others needed assistance. And it is hard to describe what it feels like to have the United States government after you. It is a terrible feeling, and Ramy, even in the early days, was solid as a rock. He said, I didn't do this, and I'd like a defense, and that's what we provided him.
Is it fair to say a lot of people use the term, I'm a target for the government? Fair to say at that point, Ramy was a target for the government to go after. So my question is, why, and how were you guys able to win?
Well, why were they after Ramy? It's hard to say. He was, even then, very successful. He'd started a company called Genesis Intermedia. They were doing very well. Okay. So there were people who were pursuing Arabs, and Ramy was a very successful Arab businessman with this company called Genesis Intermedia, and we think the government was pursuing him because of his ethnicity, which is wrong.
So it's important to note that this all happened right after 9/11. There were a lot of Americans in this country that were very angry at a lot of people in that area, and I would imagine that that is a big part or big reason why the government went after Ramy. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. After 9/11, there was a great deal, as we all know, paranoia in America, and Ramy, unfortunately, was a target of that paranoia, and the government pursued him. Not only the Securities and Exchange Commission, but the Department of Justice, and even then I saw Ramy solid as a rock. The man said, "I didn't do this," and he lost his business, but he never quit.
Ramy, I don't know what this feels like, but what does it feel like when you're told that you could be facing up to 100 years behind bars for a crime that you never committed? You never did anything wrong. What is going through your mind at that point, and how are you able to overcome that mentally and defeat this?
Well, it's like all my principles. When I went after businesses and stuff, it was the same thing. It was now a new challenge, a new thing I had to do, and I knew that I was never going to give up. And in my mind, I would rather fight and lose and win and face 100 years and make a deal. And
they offered you guys a deal, right?
Yeah, it was like 4 years, 6 years, but it was worth the fight. I mean, there's a lot of people in jail that are innocent that the government scares so much with that fear of loss. You're going to lose 100 years the rest of your life in jail. But if you take 4, you can come out and still have a life. But to me, it was a wrong thing. It was, didn't do anything wrong. Just because I'm a target, I can fight and win.
So George, during this time, I would imagine a very stressful time for Ramy.
It was.
But do you feel like he implemented a lot of the positivity in his mind, in his demeanor, that he talks about in this book to help get through this?
The roadmap you see in this book, the perseverance, the determination, the strength of will, Ramy showed back then, 20 years ago, when we were fighting this case. And the amazing thing is, he wasn't depressed. He was positive. He was ebullient. We're going to overcome. And that spirit, which he outlines very clearly in the book, was what helped us prevail over the government. We told the government, and I'm a trial lawyer, we're not pleading. We're not giving up. This is wrong. And it took years of pressure, years of financial pressure on Ramy and his businesses, but we overcame.
So I want to ask both of you guys this question. I'll start with you, George. The moment that you found out that this was over with, that he was acquitted, what was that like?
Not acquitted. Better than an acquittal. Ramy got a letter from the government called a declination letter. This was a letter written by a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles who had all the arsenal and power of the U.S. government behind him. And he wrote us a letter, which is in the book. And it said, Ramy, we are declining to prosecute you, which means they never filed the case. There was never, I'm a trial lawyer. I didn't have to present the case to a jury. The federal government realized they made a mistake. And it's the closest thing you'll ever get, Ramy, to an apology from the U.S. government. It's in the book.
Ramy, as we see this 20 years later, any anger at all inside of you for what they did? Or do you look back on it and say, hey, we conquered it, we defeated it? How do you implement that train of thought? And you talk a little bit about that in your book, not holding on to stuff like that. But how do you feel about this 20 years later?
Definitely not angry. I mean, at the time it was very stressful because not only, I mean, you have to picture what was happening. I mean, 9/11 happened. I had a public company. The market just shut down for 2 weeks when it came back. The SEC suspended the stock, so all my net worth was lost. So I had to find money to defeat the case. So now I lost all my money. I have the U.S. government after me, and it was just a battle that, again, was always. You got to imagine, a lot of people get to see these battles 1 or 2 years, but this was a 7-year battle. It was nonstop for 7 years, every day, dealing with the government, going in there, trying to convince them that they're wrong. And between George and the other attorneys we had, it was a relentless stop because I didn't want to be indicted. Even though we got advice from the other attorneys and some of the team, oh, let them indict you, we'll beat them in court because we don't want them to know what our defense is. But I thought if they understood me and they understood the case, they would never bring the indictment anyway.
Sure.
And that was a big risk. But I was willing to take that risk, but I thought that was the right thing. I just didn't want to have that indictment to happen because there was nothing wrong. So it was a long 7 years. And what was really interesting, even though they knew they were going to quit, and George can say that, they always usually indict you on a Thursday, so they arrest you on a Friday morning, so you spend jail on over the weekend before you could post your bail. So they want you to at least spend a weekend in jail. So on that Tuesday, when they were going to send that letter, they called and offered the deal again. Take 4 years, and then or you're going to be facing 100. And same answer. I said, I'd rather face 100. I'll do what you have to do. And when George and my attorney Polk called me and said, I thought it was a call to tell me that I was being indicted, but they broke the news to me that they got a letter from the government that they are not going to pursue the indictment, which, again, I didn't believe at the time. I had to ask them 5 or 6 times because after 7 years, it just seemed unreal that we finally won. I mean, all these principles of never giving up and fighting every single day proved itself out one more time.
So you were a target after 9/11.
Right.
And I want to correlate it to what's been going on in this country the last year or two,
Right.
and maybe you can help some people out there that
Right.
sadly have been the victims of Asian hate crimes.
Right.
In a sense, it's correlated to a sense where you just identify a group of people,
Right.
which is obviously is wrong. What advice would you give to all those people out there? Because there have been a lot of victims of
Right.
Asian hate crimes because of coronavirus, even though these people have absolutely nothing to do with it, just
Right.
like you had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. What would you say to that?
Asian hate crimes or any prejudice in blacks and stuff like that, it is really you can't let the outside world affect you. You just know you're in your strength and how strong you are and what you're all about. So whatever other people think of you, it doesn't matter. I never let anybody else's opinion affect the way I think. I know who I am. I know what I can do, and I know that all that is just their problem.
Sure.
So just let it go and just say it affects them more than it affects you. If you don't let it affect you at all.
Sure.
But
So, George, you've known this man a very, very long time.
That's true.
For people that don't know him personally like you do, talk to me a little bit about this book. Talk to me a little bit about the man himself. You've known him for a couple decades now, and why people should get their hands on this book and read it.
He's really a lovely teddy bear kind of a man, Ramy. He has an indomitable spirit. And I want to go back to one thing that Ramy said. So after 7 years of being pursued relentlessly by the federal government, and he gets a letter saying you're not going to be prosecuted, most people would be angry. They would be bitter. They would be upset, and the negativism would overwhelm. But this is a man with a positive spirit. He was never angry. He was never bitter. He was relieved. I almost got Ramy to drink some champagne with me that night. It didn't happen. But Ramy took that positive spirit, which he talks about in the book, the never quit, and he channeled it into a positive vein. And that's what led him to the next business, to the next success. He didn't let the negativism, which was, as we all know after 9/11, that was gripping the country as well. So it was all around us. The kind of the racism, the prejudice against people of color, which Ramy is. He shucked all that off, and he was always on to the next battle, to the next challenge in a positive manner. And that's what you see in the book. And that's why the man is the success that he is today.
Anything else that we haven't covered?
No,
I want to share. I think we've covered a lot. All right.
I do want to add,
Sure.
if you think to that also. I mean, it is really important on how you approach everything. I mean, you could either have a victim mentality or you don't, and whatever you think and you bring onto yourself. And the whole thing is I was not going to be a victim, and I knew in my mind I was going to win no matter what it took. And even if it had to go to trial, we're going to win. And I just have to say, George is the best attorney there is. I've never seen anybody at trial. And one of the things he didn't mention also, for the government to get to me, to how intense it was, they indicted somebody else to get them to turn against me so they can have a witness. And George actually got him acquitted in both with the SEC and the U.S. attorney, and they lost another leverage on me when they indicted Courtney Smith. So you can tell them about that trial a little bit too, about how they did Courtney Smith.
This is a classic technique that the government uses to put pressure on people to fold and to bargain, which is they indict someone else, a very good friend of Ramy, someone in business with him, and they told that person, and I had to convey the message that they want you to plead, they'll go easy on you, and then they want Ramy. And this individual and Ramy both said, bring it on, because I didn't do this. And that takes tremendous strength, because all the time in America, frequently, people will plead guilty to crimes they did not commit because they can't face the consequences, the alternatives. So it happens all the time. There's a federal judge in New York named Jed Rakoff who's written a book, Why Innocent People Plead Guilty. Well, Ramy was an innocent person, and he refused to bargain. He refused to sacrifice his principles. And instead, as we see in the book, he fought and he won.
All right. Well, George, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Coming up next, the author of a book that sold only 50 million copies. You might have heard of it before. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. He's going to be joining us next.